back. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
I'm George Gordon. In the studio with me today, Dr. Ted Venema, registered audiologist with Next Gen Hearing. We've been talking a lot about the new, revelations or understandings about the possible connection between being deaf or hard of hearing and dementia. Not cause, but possibly a link in there. Ted, we talked about one study. Let's talk about the one at Johns Hopkins University.
There was another study that came. These are all coming out in the past few years, so there is some gravity to it and some reality to it. I mean, this is there is connection here, and I find the articles rather interesting. But you know what? They boil so much down to common sense. Really, it does. Early intervention, early identification, early treatment. It's so much, if you've heard of the saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's what most medicine today is focusing on, prevention. Just do something about it ahead of time. Don't let your hearing loss get so bad that by the time you've admitted it to yourself. And here's what studies do show too. People wait at least 5 to 7 years to get hearing aids after really they need them. People at the point when people need hearing aids, people tend to stall and wait 5 to 7 years. Yeah, that's a long time, and it's been shown again and again that figure stands quite well. Only about 20% of people who should wear hearing aids do wear hearing aids, and hearing aids today aren't
20%.
like they. Yeah, 20%. The market is by no means penetrated, and yet there's help all around. I mean, there's, Next Gen Hearing has 38 offices. They're all over Lower Mainland and the island and the interior. I mean, there are so many places to get help. You walk in the door and someone's going to service you in the first minute you're there. I mean, people are waiting in the wings, but the public, we tend to not do anything about hearing loss. And I find it so preventable, and yet people tend to wait way, way, way too long. And it's, when you're trying to deal with hearing loss when it's really bad, it's hard to get used to hearing aids. It's much easier to get used to hearing aids when you're, say, 55, 60 than it is when you're 85 and you really need them. Hearing aids today, too, are way different than they used to be. I mean,
you can't see some of them.
No, they're not these big beige bananas hanging behind your ear. I mean, this is what people used to wear. I mean, and what hearing aids do is quite sophisticated. I mean, not only do they amplify sounds, but they actually back off amplification when the sound would be too loud. So they amplify soft sounds by a lot, and then if I start to talk louder, they automatically back off. They're meant to be, they are prescribed, just like glasses are, to fit your particular hearing loss shape, which is done on a hearing test or audiogram with X's and O's. And people have different ranges of hearing loss, from bass to mid pitches to treble. And those markings are entered into the computer. Hearing aids today are digital. They're fit via Bluetooth technology. So they're fantastically programmable and flexible. And we walk a walk with you when you get hearing aids. You're not just buying hearing aids and sent out the door. We see you on a weekly basis as you can get used to things. We adjust the settings to fit your own persnickety, your own observations. But to get back to that second article, because now I'm starting to yammer. I promise you I won't get too lost. I am in a studio here, and you've got the door bolted. So Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine had an article out called "Use It or Lose It: Hearing Loss and Dementia is Linked." That was one of those lay public articles, again, that we were talking about in the previous segment. And I looked at it and, okay, let's see the article from whence this article came. Let me look at the seed, the original article. And that turned out to be, I'm going to read this again. Hearing loss and incident dementia in the Archives of Neurology, February 2011. Well, okay, this was a different kind of study. It was a longitudinal study. In English, that means they followed the course of a whole bunch of people over the course of 12 years. And it consisted of some 600 subjects. And they divided the 600 subjects into 4 groups: people who had normal hearing, people who had mild hearing loss, people who had moderate hearing loss, and people who had severe hearing loss, because there's different ranges or degrees of hearing loss. And so they followed the course of these people over a 12-year time span, and they found again there was a statistically significant association between hearing loss and cognitive decline if untreated. Now, some of these people were wearing, and this cognitive decline actually was more aggravated or more noticeable with severe hearing loss. And that makes sense too. More with severe hearing loss than with mild hearing loss. And again, please never think that hearing loss is associated with stupidity. Hearing loss is associated with an inability to hear and comprehend speech. Because if you're not going to hear speech, you're not going to comprehend it. You've got to hear it in order to get it. So when you've got hearing loss, you're isolated and you're alone and you're not communicating. Interestingly, this study did not look for evidence of this with self-use of hearing aids. In other words, some of the people with moderate hearing loss and some of the people with severe hearing loss were wearing hearing aids. But this study didn't address that. They didn't look at that. They just looked at hearing loss, degree of hearing loss, and amount of cognitive decline that was associated with these hearing losses. And they found, association was significantly or statistically made. They suggest that there could be causal links. Even these authors, they know their statistics. They wrote, our statistic proved that there was a link, there's an association, but we couldn't really find a cause. There's an association there. But unfortunately, this study did not really look at hearing aid usage and whether that had anything to do with the rate of cognitive decline. Now, I do have another study that is just put out last year, 2015, and this one is rather exciting. This one does show much more. Well, this one shows that they divided subjects into 3 groups, and some people had no hearing loss, and some people had mild and moderate and severe hearing loss that didn't use hearing aids. And then they followed people with mild, moderate, and severe hearing loss that did use hearing aids. And in this study, they found that the people who did not use hearing aids, there was more of a cognitive decline. Now, this study that I'm pointing at now, this 3rd study, looked at people over a 25-year span.
Wow.
This is
a generation.
They started in 1989 and 90, and it was done in France. And they followed over 3,000 subjects. So I mean, when you're following that many people, your study gets what they call more powerful. It gets more statistically strong, because you've got less of a chance that, it was just a sampling error, or it was just the luck of the draw, like when you're flipping a coin, I mean, if you're flipping a nickel, I can't say flipping a penny anymore, but when you're flipping a nickel, you've got a 50% chance of it being heads or tails.
Right. And
this is the basis of statistics. Maybe in one setting you'll get 48% heads, another time 52% heads, but eventually it'll all boil down to about 50%. When you've got tons and tons of subjects, then your study grows in its strength. So this study, this 3rd one that I'm talking about now, followed 3,000 plus subjects over a 25-year time span. And I can explain more about that one as we go along. But that study, in a nutshell, found out that the use of hearing aids stemmed the tide, stopped the cognitive decline. And again, not because hearing loss causes stupidity, but because the people were retained and claimed in the game of life. They're communicating. Less depression, less isolation, that comes with hearing loss that's untreated. And so there was no statistical difference between the people who had no hearing loss versus the people who had hearing loss and were using hearing aids.
That's
that's
astounding.
That's a powerful study, and that's just out of as of 2015. And I just think, and again, it just points the arrow in the direction of common sense. Early
common sense is not always common until enough people have studied it.
Let's talk about uncommon common sense,
Wow.
which unfortunately is the reality. The public tends to leave hearing loss too long, untreated. And this is just to say, get your butt out the door and do something about it. You'll be so glad you did.
In our next segment, let's talk about how we get people to that to the Next Gen office and have that test, and who are your partners in convincing people this is going to improve their lives and improve their quality of lives as they get older. We'll have that coming up next on Boomer Life as we continue our talk with registered audiologist Dr. Ted Venema. And we are talking with the good folks from Next Gen Hearing here on CIL 650.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.